Well, good morning to you all. Welcome to the AFI Group of Companies webinar. This is a Wilson Access webinar based on route planning and safety tips for track-mounted MEWPs. Hope you're all warm. Thankfully, the room I'm in's got a nice warm radiator because it's slightly chilly here today. I'm going to aim to get this webinar kind of wrapped up between 45 minutes, then we're sort of 45 to 50 minutes, then a short question and answer session at the end. So, feel free if you've got questions to ask, please, you can type them in and I can endeavour to get as many of them as answered during the webinar. But please be rest assured that any questions that you answer, or sorry, questions that you ask and I can't answer during the time, I will endeavour to answer them personally after the webinar. Right, so first of all, thanks very much for attending. Appreciate you're busy, you've got busy lives and whatever. Right, we won't focus too much on that picture of me. That's enough to keep the kids away from the fireplace. But just basically looking at the my role in the company. As you can see, I represent the company on a number of committees and councils, Strategic Foreign Plant Safety Group for MEWPs, which is very, very prominent in the UK, and a working group which is a BSI committee for the new BS 8460, which is the code of practice for MEWP. So that we had a meeting in London yesterday, looking at the new guidance and what you will be you'll be getting. Hopefully, you should be getting that sometime towards the latter part of 2017. As you can see there, I'm not going to bore you putting all the things on there that I've done, but I am quite proficient in a lot of sort of tutoring and NEWP and IOSH and Ipath and PASMA, etc. So just quickly going through the agenda, aims and objectives really today is to take you through a walk through how you plan a route for track-mounted MEWPs. Now that's whether or not you've got your own, whether you hire them, whether you consider that you may have multiple jobs. Really sort of focusing on some of the incidents that have happened in our industry, and obviously looking at why these things do unfortunately become involved in incidents. Take you a quick look through the latest fatal incidents from the Ipath Accident Database, and we'll look at options. So for whether or not when you are hiring a machine or whether you take the self-drive option. But yeah, focusing solely on planning the route, and it can save time, it can save damage to the infrastructure and clearly the machine, and ultimately it can save lives. There's been a number of fatalities which I'll show you very shortly, and time spent planning is time spent well in my view, and you've got to look at that and got to think about where it's going, what it's going to do, what's the options for you. We're going to look at ground conditions and some of the new guidance that's coming out there, and then obviously look at a little bit of some of the power options that we have and the issues that we find when we send a machine out, and maybe they're not going to use it on diesel, they're going to use it on mains electric, and some of the issues that do sort of crop up in our sort of breakdown analysis. We're going to look at traffic and pedestrian management. Only a quick look on vertical recently will show that there's been a number of incidents, not with track mounts but with truck mounts, unfortunately, which have cost lives. You've got to consider what's going to happen and potential for that. And of course we're going to look at rescue procedures. Those of you that are familiar with MEWPs will will understand that often we have one person on the ground, but sometimes we need more than one person, and I'll cover that a little bit later on. And really there's a bit of a shout out to the manufacturers to try and get their acting gear. Ipath Database then, the Accident Incident Database. So there's a very effective reporting mechanism now, which is now up and running on the Ipath website. It allows you to report your accidents, your incidents, and really anything that's involving a MEWP. Prior to this, the MEWP industry itself had an unknown level of accidents and incidents. So often we found that these came to light through safety alerts which were bounded around the main contractors ringing us and telling us that they've had an incident, or sometimes not even ringing us to tell us that they've had an incident with a machine, and of course the media, such websites, etc. So it was evident that Ipath wanted to improve safety, not only within their own members but also within the clients and clearly the supply chain. So the UK Country Council, which I sit on as a committee member, made it mandatory for all Ipath members to report accidents and incidents which are MEWP related, and that in itself has made a massive impact, because what it then does then is basically helps us to focus insofar as what training needs changing, does it need changing, is it right, is it fit for purpose, what guidance documents are out there, etc., etc. So there's a whole raft of things which can help us improve safety day to day. You can get on the Ipath website, you can register. What I will say there, and like it says there, anything that you enter on it is kept strictly confidential, so we as members will not even know that it's happened. And you might find that we report an incident on our machine with, for example, with yourself, and you report it. Ipath are smart enough to know that that is one incident, it's not two. So again, your name will never be put up in lights to say that you've had an incident with a track-mounted MEWP or a normal MEWP. So let's just go look through some of the fatal data. So these were published on the 1st of July this year. I must point out that these are worldwide statistics. There's quite a few slides. These are the only, because of the time constraints we've got today, these are the two where I thought were sort of most prevalent for what we're looking at. So if we look at the annual fatalities, you can see still by a clear leader is falls from height. You can see, albeit in 2015 there was a slight reduction in comparison to overturns. You can see electrocution is still quite high there, certainly more in 2015. And what, again, dare I say it, most of our electrocutions do tend to happen over in the United States, and I know there's a couple of people listening from the United States this morning, so I do see the emails, so I do know who's coming on there. So it clearly shows what Ipath have found out. Again, looking at this, the guidance that we've got, you can see there that a quarter of all fatal incidents are from overturns. These could be from a number of reasons, but without stating the obvious, certain incidents are no doubt going to be from poor ground, driving on or across, or traversing across slopes, tracks or wheels dropping off slab concrete. But undoubtedly it's going to be ground giving way, and damaging the surface underneath, which in contact will turn the machine over. There are clearly other sort of factors, for example, overloading, snagging, wind. There's all sorts of things that could have caused that. But then if we look down into the actual by MEWP classification, and really I want to focus on the 1B category, which is the category that we're doing today. So you can see there was 27 occurrences from falls from height, and again these are worldwide. With over 1.1 million MEWPs in the world, you think, well, that's that's a pretty good run rate, but it's still 27 fatalities too many. You can see then that the next one was electrocution, and as I mentioned previously, the United States has its fair lion's share of them, because the makeup of their infrastructure for electrics and the way they distribute their power is totally different to what we see in the UK. Live power lines running down the street effectively, so that's why unfortunately there are a number of fatalities, a higher number of fatalities in the States. Overturns, you can see there we've got quite a few, 11 occurrences there from overturns. Certainly not as much as mobile booms or mobile verticals, but equally, and if we look down the line there, you can see then we've got 6 occurrences from mechanical or technical. I do know that some of them are where, for example, truck-mounted MEWPs have been re-chassied, so they've taken the superstructure off the top and put it onto another chassis, and some of them have failed, tragic occurrences. And then you can see entrapment, and entrapment, 4 occurrences where people have unfortunately been sort of crushed against another object, or fell against another object with the machine. And then last but not least, they're hit by vehicle or objects. So they've positioned the machine, 4 occurrences, positioned the machine, and unfortunately something has made contact with them, a truck, a van, a fork truck, a piece of plant, etc. So you can see by a country mile still falls remains falls from height in MEWP still remains the biggest causes of fatalities, closely followed by overturns, and there's something that we were going to focus on today. Now the category, just to dispel and make sure you're all fully aware of it, I'm sure you are, the Ipath course is a 1 to 3 day course. The category that we're doing today, or discussing today, is the static boom, category 1B. You've seen the Ipath poster, I would hope there, and you can see in the top right hand corner of the poster on the left hand side you can see the 1B, and you can see that it's actually truck mounts, van mounts, trailer mounts, and spider type platforms. So again, just be mindful that this 1B category is quite a large category, and that kind of really emphasizes in this. I mean, I haven't put a spider mount or a track mount there, but you can see that trailer mount, 10 meter, 12 meter machine, and yet we've got the truck mount on the right hand side there, which is 100 plus meters. It's the same category. So probably, you know, some of you might think, well, I wouldn't mind being trained on the little trailer mount, but not in a million years would I climb into that truck mount. It's still the most diverse category there is, and it does actually show you the disparity of this category. So when we look at tracked or wheeled machines, you've got to be mindful that this route planning also needs to consider wheel typed units. On the right hand side we've got the tracked unit, on the left hand side the Falcon Volk-Schmidt, we've got a wheeled version. So you might specify a tracked or a spider type MEWP, and the emphasis there is you can get both types. If you can see on the picture on the left there, it's got the similar sort of push bar that you would get on like a pedestrian fork truck, where you have the little bumper bar and you move it forward and backwards, these things. So why would we need to know this? So for example, wheeled units are going to have and impose a higher point load over roughly the same machine dimensions, and clearly will not have the same capability for rough terrain or climbing as to what a tracked MEWP would have. Tracked spiders, as we refer to them, are suited to both indoor and outdoor applications for working at height, and they certainly can be quite surprising given their initial width when the machine is in its stowed position. Don't forget, power can be a mains 230 volt, it can be petrol, it can be diesel, and of course some have lithium, and some also utilize battery support for loading and unloading purposes. So there's a huge array of power options to you out there. Great little pictures there. If you can see, that climbing, you probably can't really appreciate how steep that slope is yet. This has been remote controlled up there from a very safe distance, whereas the picture on the left there, set up in a theatre or stroke opera house, again, looking at that, you consider the method of access there is always going to be a bit challenging. So self-drive or operated. So spider lifters or track mounts, as we refer to them, are increasingly requested for both internal work and external work, whether that's cleaning, maintenance, work in shopping centres, Christmas lights, or even telecommunications. They're a very, very versatile piece of equipment, and they're able to access areas where other more traditional MEWPs, sadly can't access. So covering self-drive or operated, if you choose a self-drive, this may mean then collecting the machine and effectively loading it if you don't have your own trailer. If you had your own trailer, you can maybe, depending on your rental company, attach and away you go. But it also might mean installing it, and that would mean installing it get into its intended place. So you can see there's a challenging scenario for some operator there. You can see you can see the winch ropes holding on to it to prevent it from going back down the stairs. You can see the trackway and the matting that's been laid down. So just remember, if you're going to be considering putting this in that position, just think of the situation there where if you are having to deliver it, okay, or collect it, you've also got to consider the driving license requirements for the person driving it. Are they actually licensed to tow a trailer? And clearly the competence of the driver to tow that trailer with that spider lift attached. It certainly could be an expensive day. There's been quite a few in the past where unfortunately they've either fell off, tipped off, gone round roundabouts too quickly, and caused no end of issues. When a MEWP is hired with the operator always remains under the control of the hirer. So the hirer retains overall responsibility for the works. Now what the operator can't do is knowingly go and put that machine in an unsafe in an unsafe state. Great picture that. Sorry it's probably slightly out of focus for you, but I don't know if you can see it properly. You've got a toy pen there straddling a walkway, and you can see the mats that have been and the outriggers have been positioned on the walls, on the left-hand side of there, clearly, it's a church, so you're going to have subterranean issues, pardon the pun, but again, I'm sure whoever surveyed that job has carried out a very, very thorough survey to ensure that there is nothing that's likely to collapse under there. So it's about knowing your skills and your ability. We know your knowledge is good, and you're no doubt aware of the risks in operating these types of machines, but unfortunately accidents do happen, and it's all too unfortunate that situations like this are happening. I've used this picture on a previous webinar before, and I look at this one, I still think of the sadness of looking at this picture. You can see the person on the left hand there giving CPR to somebody that's unfortunately not very not probably long for this world, and you can see the platform there in the center, vertical. To get it into this position, you've really got to have done something silly, daft, and potentially put the machine in an unsafe location. If you consider as well the members of the public, there's very little sort of preparation there to protect people. I don't know the outcome of this one, but certainly not good. So when we're planning the route, then you've got to consider countless considerations, and it's what we often call a MEWP survey, a site survey. In BS 8460, which is the code of practice, and this is the document that myself and a number of colleagues in the industry are working on, it actually defines what a survey is. It's a survey of a location by a competent person prior to the use of the MEWP in order to assess hazards associated with that location and, so far as is practicable, the work to be carried out. It will determine the most suitable MEWP and the method for the use for the task to be undertaken. Now, this definition may change. Certainly one aspect of that definition will change because it focuses on the word competent person, and competent person seems to be moving away from a lot of the HSE guidance and documentation, and they're referring to SKE, skills, knowledge and experience. You're not going to get the skills unless you've got the knowledge, and if you've not got the knowledge, you're not going to get the experience. So we are talking some way around about training. But ask yourself the question: has the area and the site, has it been previously surveyed? What was the outcome of that one? Capability of the ground and the surface. What is the route? What hazards and risks are there to the area? Have you got the person trained? Are they familiar with that type of machine? What other environmental factors may be appropriate? Be mindful that whatever the intended location, whatever route you've specified, in that specification area you're going to have to consider floor loadings, the length of the width of the machine, what pinch points you've got en route to that location. And what I mean by a pinch point is where I'm rotating the machine or turning the machine to get it into an area. I could end up getting myself pinned in myself and crushed. What about changes in surface or surface level? Considering steps and ramps. Remember, tracks, when going across rough terrain, they may have the ability to be mechanically or hydraulically adjusted. So we will 9 times out of 10 they'll be delivered with the track in the narrow position, but then you may have the ability to actually make them wider to make it more stable. What about overhead hazards, electrical hazards, indoor, outdoor, wind capacity, etc. What capacity do you need in the platform? When I'm in the platform, what rotation of machine do I have? What have I got to clear? You can see the picture on the left there. I can't go much further up with the lower boom, and you can see there the upper boom, or the primary boom in this situation, is probably sort of 4 or 5 feet away from the top there. So when I've considered all that, then we also need to consider things for emergency, and how we're going to get that machine down. If a need arises. When finishing, what about charging, refueling? And what about environmental considerations? You're not going to be that theatre's best customer then if you go and drop a large amount of oil or spill some diesel. So consider your spillage aspects and things. And dare I say it, the lack of a survey has sometimes resulted in costly repairs, the operator either injuring themselves and others, and maybe and in some cases, like we've seen, fatal occurrences, when a simple walk of the route, identifying potential issues, would have been prevented this. Remember, you're going to need a thorough risk assessment, people aware of risks and hazards, and this rescue plan. This rescue plan that you've got in your mind, has it been practiced? People, do they know what to do in the emergency? So I take a task, in this situation, this is in my hometown in Leeds, so getting up there to do whatever them, and it's got God knows how many Christmas decorations in that area at the moment. You can always take advantage of a free survey. This is the Trinity Centre in Leeds. So for those of you new, or you can put your employees on a MEWP managers or MEWP manager on a MEWPs for managers course. Anybody with responsibility for MEWP activities should have received the necessary training that they need to enable them to have the skills, knowledge and experience. We often hear of experience of people tracking or driving MEWPs into an area. So there's my situation. Let's say, for example, I need to go and refit that light on the left-hand side, for example, it's shining into the sort of atrium. This is my route into it, so that's looking. Been up there many times. A simple stair that you get up there and into the shopping centre. Once you've got into the shopping centre, that's my setup area. So clearly we're going to be doing it out of hours. Clearly you've got other risks and situations. You can see the staircase just to the right of the green sign. So situations that we've got. Sometimes we may have to interrogate the ground itself, and this may need you to get information from the centre manager, the works manager, and that may determine the type of MEWP that you need and ensure that the point loads that are exerted from the machine onto that ground, whatever that ground is not exceeded. There may be restrictions or changes in level, like so. Okay, so you've got from the delivery driver's dropped it outside, you've got to track it up there and get it into that position there. Okay, always an assumption that a track will go anywhere, all right, and it's far from correct. I've, dare I say it, in my ex-forces as a plant operator, I've never got them that bad, may I add, but I have got them stuck before. And there's an assumption that a tracked machine will go anywhere, and it's far from correct. The underside of any tracked machine will have what we often refer to as a belly plate, and that belly plate is to protect the underside of the machine and to give the tracks the ability to be, above, position the machine above the ground. But unfortunately, once you get stuck in the mud, it's like those of you that have got your foot stuck in a, not to that extent, but you've got your welly stuck in a bit of mud. You can't get it out because it's suction. So what becomes 3 ton is actually 5, 6, 7, 8 tons to remove. So this, certainly in that situation, write-off, costly recovery, downtime, etc., etc. So just be mindful of that. Okay, Ipath is back. Crikey, it'll be back 2005, maybe 2006. Brought out a poster, and the reason I was involved with this working group back in the time because the amount of predominantly truck and track mounts that were tipping over was phenomenal. It really was. And basically what you were getting there was people walking machines into an area and then going across the level and then suddenly tipping over. And you can see some of the red, danger type indications there going down a step, going across a traverse of a slope, and some of it is just really, really simple, easy guidance that we should always be aware of. And the irony is that most of this is not actually in most manufacturers' manuals. So they'll say fold the machine up and track it to the next point. Yeah, but as soon as you go over the curb, you're just going to tip the thing over. If you can see that picture at the top, particularly, but it shows they're tracking along the ground, and you can see the outriggers are extended, and it shows there that the outriggers are approximately 10 centimeters from the ground. So if I get into a tip situation, or it starts to wobble or lose control, the outrigger is going to hit the ground. Remember, these are sometimes very narrow machines but have a very high center of gravity. So something that's 780 millimeters wide can be 2 meters high. So you've got to be mindful that these are very, very easy to tip over. Whenever we're going to do any surveying, clearly we need to have some method of measuring. Now again, you might circumnavigate this by saying I want to want to have a rental survey. That's a given. We will do that for you. We will come out there quite happily and survey the job. You can see on the picture on the right there, I've got to get up there, but it might mean climbing up the steps to get to that location, depending on the type of machine. I have my disto laser on the left-hand side. Yes, we used to have a pad and a tape measure, and you used to take your best guess of the height. And yeah, sometimes you got it right. You overspec the machine. Sometimes you got it wrong and had a bit of egg on your face. But these distos now, you can do multiple lasers, multiple measurements plug them into your, upload them and Bluetooth them to your iPad, and it will give you exact dimensions and measurements. Certainly very, very good piece of equipment for going forward. So route planning then, planning. So the task may involve either internal or external, or even both. Regardless of that location, there are good housekeeping rules that we need to adopt. What are your maximum loads on your surface? Is your ground, is it capable of being travelled on? Can you set up that machine on that ground? What's the maximum point load of your machine's outrigger or pad? The two will be different. When you're considering the pad, that is the pad that's on the underside of the on the end of the outrigger. When you're then going to put an outrigger on top of a pad, then on top of a bigger pad, then the two of them will be different. Have you got sufficient space, room to set up? Sometimes you can get multi-configuration set up, and I'll show you some slides on this a little bit later on. You can see there on the left-hand picture the machine going down the railway tracks there. Yeah, obviously you've got your steps, your grass. So you may have worked out your route. You may have had to move a bit of material, or found that your intended route is maybe going to be a bit tight fit. You might find that, irrespective of the fact that you've surveyed the job the week earlier, when you come back 4 days later, somebody could have dug a trench across it. That's happened to me before, and actually the machine's on an island. So you've got to be mindful of them. When it comes to changes in level, these can be somewhat challenging. So changes in level are, for a track machine, very, very challenging. And certainly for the impatient ones around us and amongst us. Remember that tracked spider has a high centre of gravity, and due to the fact in most cases outriggers are not extended, it's going to be easy to overturn it. A simple curb, a step, can have severe consequences when you're travelling these machines. I mentioned earlier about getting into an area, a pinch point. You may have to remove the platform. It can take minutes to remove the platform, and unfortunately people tend to think, oh, I can manage to do it. The picture that's up on the top left there, take that basket off, or that platform off there, probably most 4 minutes, but I will need somebody else. I'm quite a big lad, but I'll still need somebody else, right? Because I've got to hold the platform up, remove the pin, remove the locking device, and then ease the platform off. So I'm going to need somebody else to help and get that down. Most of them these days have wheels on the underside of them, so I can wheel it into place, so it prevents me from having to manually handle it. So just be mindful of that. So capacity-wise, remember reach is always measured from the centre of your machine, and the difference between platform and working height is 2 meters or 6 foot. You'd be surprised to find that a number of manufacturers do work in different measurements. Some of the biggest blunders that we've had when someone opts to survey the task themselves is they omit to find out the working height, but then wrongly state the platform height, or vice versa. It can be a costly mistake, and again, just remember there is always that free survey from Wilson Access or from your rental supplier. But however when you look at it, you're going to need the manual and you're going to need the spec sheet to find out the full working envelope of that machine, and it's critical for tasks when a site-specific or reach is being requested. The picture shows you a working area for a tracked spider, and you can see there evident on there. It's given you 2 ratings. It's given you A and B. A is 120 kilos, which is 1 person plus their tools. And they always work on the average weight of a person being 80 kilos most of the time. I do believe EN 280 is going to change that, as they're well aware that the average person does not weigh 80 kilos. Where you can see range B equates to 200 kilos, and there's a big significant difference there. A refers to the machine with the jib unfolded, and B refers to the jib folded. So effectively setting up that machine, it means when I get to position A, or I wish to get to position A, I can only have 1 person in the platform. And that's evident here on this next picture here. So you can find sometimes, I mean this is one of our Hinnerworth gold lifts that we run. You can see there you may have spec'd a machine for 4.5–5 meters reach, and you might have set the machine up considering and thinking that you're going to be able to get out to 6.5 meters, and you'll find that actually the machine will stop if there's 2 people in the platform. One thing to note as well is you can see there how high the tracks are off the ground. All tracked spiders must have their tracks fully clear of the ground. They won't lift. But what you'll also find is you'll only ever achieve the maximum height as well if the tracks are fully elevated, so your outriggers are fully down. And that's often where we find some people are actually half a metre out because they've not actually lifted the tracks fully clear of the ground. Hopefully you can understand that picture. Many different types of manufacturers out there are going to have different ratings and capacity charts, so just be mindful and getting to know them a little bit more. Okay, when we look at ground conditions and surface conditions, the hirer is deemed, for the purpose of today's webinar, I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that you're the hirer. You're deemed to have knowledge of your site or your property or your land where this machine is going to be delivered. And as that, you warrant the condition of the site or the place of delivery of plant is suitable for the use of that machine. If, in your opinion, the ground, including any sort of private access road or track, is soft or unsuitable for the plant to be travelled over, transported over or erected on, then you have got to supply and lay suitable timbers. And it does say that in the CPA conditions and terms. Timbers is probably a little bit loose there, because 9 times out of 10 these days it's actually matting that you run on, it's trackway that you tend to have. It does say or equivalent support in a suitable position for the plant to travel over. So again, this is going to be your responsibilities. As we know, failure of the ground on which MEWPs stand and move is often a frequent cause of some serious incidents. And you can see there I've put the pad down, but then I've also put an outrigger pad underneath it, like I mentioned earlier. You can see the picture, quite a heartfelt picture there. You can see damage to the platform. No doubt the fence or the hedge, should I say, has taken a little bit of the brunt of the impact. You can see he's missed a wall. Why he was over here, I've absolutely no idea at all, given that it's probably likelihood of his work was most of it was considered to be on the building, but who knows. But you can see there, again, landing on the pavement, could have been anybody walking past there that day. So serious day with potentially life-changing consequences. Okay, ground and surface then, they're always going to rely on the condition of the ground from which they stand for their stability. MEWPs, as we know, operate on either wheels or tracks, and spiders are no different. It says there may require the use of stabilizer outriggers to increase the supporting base, lift, level and stabilize it. This is taken out of the new document that I was referring to earlier. But that, instead of referring to wheels or tracks or outriggers, it's now what we consider to be what's called the point of contact with the ground, because it can change. In some points, and this is why I'm referring to this, your point of contact is going to be a track, and then it will change to an outrigger or an outrigger pad. Now, back in 2006, I was involved in the first group that did any work on this new ground, at the time, this new ground conditions, and it was always about trucks and track-mounted machines using pads under their outriggers. At the time, we had a number of overturns. Clearly, some of them were fatal, and nearly in all occasions when we looked at them, what little information we had, it was often an underlying cause of the lack of support under the actual under the pad. So the Spread the Load campaign was brought into fruition, and this guidance was initially created to reduce that, and it did. It worked. It worked really well. Just to clarify and make sure that we understand what an outrigger is. An outrigger is a device intended to increase the supporting base of the MEWP and level it in its operation. So it's going to increase your supporting base. It's going to make you wider. It's got the ability to level it, take into account the ground. Whereas a stabilizer is a device or system used to stabilize a MEWP by supporting and or leveling the complete MEWP or the extending structure. And even in the BS 8460, some examples of a stabilizer are jacks, suspension locking devices, and extending axles. So when we were getting into the world of outriggers, right, that's where we certainly refer to using pads under outrigger pads under pads, all right, and making sure that we do that. So when we're setting up, what we need to consider then is ground conditions. Consideration must be given to the ground, stability where the machine is traveling, I mentioned earlier about the guidance currently stating traveling with the outrigger foot 1 foot from the ground. You can't always do that. You might not be able to do that in an alleyway or something like that. So, but again, it's mindful of that. Outrigger settings. So again, if we can see there now, I've got this picture here. It's completely set up. It's in its widest position possible. The outriggers are down. You can see there the tracks though are only probably sort of 5 or 6 inches off the ground, because that we've got the consideration of the headroom there. So in some respects there we're not getting the full utilization of that machine. So remember, to get the full height of that, I would have to have them tracks fully elevated off the ground. If we're going to look at stability side, we always need to make sure that the machine is level, and so you will find that a lot of machines will auto level, but nevertheless of that, I never just trust auto level. I go and look at the spirit level bubble, and I want that bubble in the center as much as I possibly can. That's a good tip, because then you know that the machine is level. And that's also another good point to point out, that if you're ever looking down and you can see the spirit level bubble has moved from the center, it's time to come down and find out why that bubble has moved. All right, there could be something underlying underneath there which you're not familiar with. The width of the machine. So here you can see me. I'm in that platform there, and I'm narrow jacked. And so basically, I've not opened up the outriggers into their widest position, but you can see I'm narrow jacked, and that basically means there that I will only be allowed to move that boom in the rotation to the well, you can see the lower boom that's positioned to around about 11 o'clock. I'll be able to remove that boom round to about 10 o'clock, consequently moving the basket round to about 2 o'clock, and the platform will stop. It will not allow you to go any further. Whereas if, for example, here I've got it set out narrow jacked one side and open on the other side there. So you can see now I'll be able to get approximately, from 10 o'clock round to about 4 o'clock approximately, and it'll give me full utilization of that area. Okay, so once I've set out what my on our Toypen range of machines, once I've set out the outriggers, all right, depending on what setting I've set, it will automatically default to what range I'm allowed to move. It will, of course, affect the operating radius of the machine. The height can be altered as required on the Toypen range, but you must ensure the tracks are off the ground. And you'll be able to, like I said, achieve maximum platform height if your outriggers are at their maximum height. So basically fully down. It works a bit backwards. Once I've set the machine up, so imagine now I'm down on the ground, I've set the machine up, it's imperative that I go around and make sure that each outrigger is individually and got direct pressure on the spreader pad that's underneath its outrigger. Right, what I don't do is just think, oh yeah, it's down. I make sure that direct pressure. As with all MEWPs, you're going to carry out a full pre-use check of the machine. You're going to ensure that the function checks work, and of course you're going to ensure and make sure that the machine will be able to be recovered from ground should the need arise. So some of these platforms, some of these track machines are designed to operate on sloped areas. These must only be done with strict set tolerances. When carrying out any site survey to identify the correct selected machine for a job, accurate measurements must be taken of the ground at ground level and look at the gradient. An inclinometer is a perfect instrument for those individuals or companies working in these scenarios when they're doing site surveys, and this will always be enable you to measure for angles of the slope, or what we sometimes refer to as the tilt. As you can see there, I mentioned earlier about this picture. You can see the bottom picture there. You can now clearly see what I mean about the 10 centimeters. And the top right-hand picture there, you can see we've got a big red circle prohibiting sign saying don't travel across transverse slopes. But you can see the picture underneath it saying that's how you should travel. The picture on the bottom one, what you can't see there, or not particularly well, is there's a pallet underneath the tracks, and what this contractor had decided to do was coming off this sort of paved area and trying to get it onto this road, they decided to put a pallet down. So as they drove the machine forward, the pallet gave way and the machine tipped over on its side. So machine goes straight away onto 2/3 rate. You're going to be charged for that, and it's going to be a very expensive day. Unfortunately, what you can see on the top left-hand picture is a result of a fatality which happened a couple of years ago. What you can't see is the ground is sloping quite considerably there. It's quite a bit of camber. The operator hadn't offset the tracks to allow for the slope, and unfortunately when they were going up the ramps of the vehicle, which was not really a suitable vehicle, the machine slipped sideways and actually landed, killing the operator. That, if you look on vertical, you'll see the picture and you'll be able to read the statement. I think the director's just got a custodial sentence for that and a fine. It's essential when we are doing and we're specifying our guys potentially for load and unloading. These people are trained in this duty. They must be trained to load and unload. Again, of course, whoever you hire your machines from, you would expect, of course, that they are trained in load and unloading. So, make sure they have got the load and load costs, because they're doing it on your site for your people. So when we're setting up, the spreader plate must be set on firm and level ground. And you can see there on the top left-hand picture, albeit it's not a tracked machine, that's an outrigger pad with a recess. The picture on, so if I just go and zoom in on that a little bit more, the picture on the right, and without trying to be smart here, this is you can see the pad at the bottom of the outrigger, but you can see there I'm having to attach a pad, an outrigger pad, to that actual pad itself. And again, you may choose to not think you don't need them. The supply of the machine, I don't need them. What's the point? The reduction in the ground pressure is phenomenal by putting these pads on there. The foot must always be centered on the spreader pad as much as possible, and your guidance that's going to come out shortly will have a new ready reckoner for all weight points. No, you can't see that. Don't worry too much about it at the moment. It's coming from Ipath. You're going to be able to identify the type of machine. It will recommend the outrigger pad size. It's going to give you all the conversion tables that you probably ever need, and ultimately specify and tell you which pad you actually need. So really useful tool that's coming. Picture of that other machine from the opposite side. Obviously you've got the guy dejected, stood with his hands on his hips. You can see that this machine's tracks are not extended, not that they need to be in that situation, but you can see that they're fully retracted there. But I think at the bottom there in the foreground, you can see there's some sort of sleeper stroke, railway scaffold board type thing, and you can see there obviously the machine has gone over. Again, bizarre. He's obviously got his lower boom quite elevated, so it may well be an overloading scenario that's caused this to go out. May be a fault with the machine, a limit switch not working. If you look at the ground control lead that's actually balanced in the hedge, you never know, he might have actually been setting up the machine and trying it out and the thing's tipped over with nobody in the platform. Hopefully that was the case. So slopes and gradients. Gradients are usually expressed in a percentage, and angles are usually expressed in a degree. So all MEWPs are rated for their ability to ascend and descend a slope. You find very rarely where they actually specify for transverse, so going across a slope. Some manufacturers have done this, and good on them. The highest grade of machines can ascend while maintaining a particular speed, and that's sometimes termed as the machine's gradability. For most MEWPs, this shows the grading capacity of the MEWP in percentages. For example, 40%, but as you'll see in a second in the chart, this is just half of the figure in degrees. So picture I found on the internet, not wishing to embarrass anybody, but can you see that pad at the bottom there? He's tracked it in. It's clearly some type of arboricultural work, so tree trimming, etc. You can see the tracks are still in contact with the ground. I'm sure you've all sledged down a hill before. I don't think I probably need to say much more about that. The fact that he's actually not in the platform probably is a telling tale insofar as he's probably either bottled it or having second thoughts. You can see there now, there's your grade and there's your angles. So you can see them, 100% is 45 degrees, a 1-in-1 slope. 200% is a 2-in-1, 63.43 degrees. So, massive difference. A 50% slope is a 1-in-2, 26 degrees, 26.5 degrees. So the effect on some machines and the capability or the inability for them to climb is quite challenging. There's an example of a, I know you can't see the figures in there, but again it's showing you there an example of the tracks in the retracted position and in the extended position, but it's also showing you, more importantly, the angle to which the outrigger is allowed to be, or the outrigger pad is allowed to be put at. So there are some really good things in the manufacturer's manuals. There's an example of the tracks being split accordingly. So this is a hydraulically operated track where you can change it for going across a transverse slope. So you imagine that scenario now, so that right-hand track down, and that would allow you to safely negotiate that, like we said earlier. So Wanda leading, there's been a number of incidents on Wanda leading. The Ipath operators course will cover Wanda leading. You can see there now, that particular control, quite a complex control really. You've got a dial on the left hand side, you've got a number of controls, and then you've got another type of control there on a Teupen. So you've got Hinnower before, Teupen now. You can see there are marked differences. You can see here this has got color coding systems, whereas that one it doesn't seem to have color coding systems. It's got left hand side, it's got a computer screen. So again, it's the same category. The two red paddles up in the top, these are your drive controls, whereas these two are the ones that are either side, the ones that you can see there, the red tracks forward and backwards. Number of controls. I actually do feel they're very intuitive, but you've got to know what you're on about in these sort of things. Okay, Wanda leading, you can see I'm stood there a safe distance apart, away from the machine. This particular machine is on mains at this point, so I'm tracking it into a place. I've extended the tracks as well, and you can see there I've got the tracks extended. Sorry, I've got the outriggers extended. So God forbid, the machine tries to turn over. All right, one of the outriggers will make contact with the ground. All right, so that's just really sort of for benefit there. When we're looking at power, clearly we've got big issues these days with health. So we've got to be mindful of the diesel fumes that can be given off in confined spaces. Be careful with this. I mean, obviously there's a lot of information going around on the internet now at the moment, with health and well-being, etc. Okay, so we might choose to have just get me the cursor in the right place. We may choose to use on mains power, and normally this is a 10-meter length maximum 110 volt cable. So we'd have something like a 5 kVA 16 amp 110 volt. The maximum length of that lead on most machines is 10 meters. If you exceed 10 meters, and you can to a slight extent, but if you exceed it, all right, you will get a noticeable drop off in your power, which effectively means that your machine that you think is going to lift you at 1 meter every 30 seconds or something like that will do 1 meter every 2 minutes, because you're not getting enough power there. So you've got to be mindful of things. Also, when you're on mains power, you'll often find that there is no noise, which is what they're really for, environmentally friendly, but there's no noise until you actually trigger a function. So once you operate a function, then the motor will jump into action. So just be mindful of that, and always check the leads, the amount of leads. Again, this is an example of one where somebody's left, and it's not for one of our machines, one I picked up off the internet, but you can see there, we tend to drag the leads and you forget that it's actually attached to something, so you can pull them out. So just be mindful of that, pat testing, etc., etc. Okay, only in the last couple of days, as I mentioned earlier, and I know we've got a truck mount on the right hand side, but there's been 2 fatalities in the States where truck mounts have been made contact with other vehicles, have hit them. It is crucial to segregate track MEWPs from vehicles, and for obviously pedestrians. If you're identifying an exclusion zone, that exclusion zone has got to be big enough to take into account what you potentially may drop. Now ideally we don't drop anything, I accept that, but unfortunately sometimes things do drop. So be mindful of that. This is sometimes referred to as TM, traffic management, and it can be a costly aspect of that, but it needs to be done professionally. Remember, we've got the health, the sentencing guidelines now. Failing to protect the operator and the public is going to be an expensive day. Remember, boom and platform swing, and make sure that nothing's going to go outside the confines of these pedestrian walkways and such. Okay. Rescue procedures, we need to plan, and clearly, planning for emergencies is important. So we need to have a rescue plan in place. It's need to become communicated, and people need to be aware of it. We've also got to ensure that a ground key has been made available. We should have appointed a ground rescue person, and then we need to consider how we're going to raise the alarm if something goes wrong. And then we need to, decide how we're going to affect the rescue, and more importantly, who's going to affect the rescue. I put these pictures on here. These are a number of emergency lowering from some of our machines, and you can see there we've got an array of valves. Now you have got a guide to tell you what's what here to bring that machine down, but it could be quite unnerving to a would-be operator to suddenly think, I've got to start turning valves to to make that machine come down. Oops. Just let me jump back to where I've gone. The wonders of this. Okay, so turning valves. So you can imagine now I'm turning one valve there. That's going to actuate them 6 spool valves that you can see there then. And then I've now got to figure and consider which valve I need to go to actually operate that down. Conversely, looking at this now, you can see a colleague of mine in the foreground using the handle, but hopefully you can see the controls on the opposite side of the boom. So it would be impossible for one person to hand pump the machine down and use the ground controls to bring it down. So effectively your emergency lowering procedure must involve 2 people on this particular machine. You can see here now, again on the left hand side you can see a little diagram, so you're always going to have some indication of what there, but I've got wheels, I've got keys, I've got valves I need to push, and that's just the emergency lowering part. What you've not seen is the bit that I've already had to actuate to get it to do that. Okay, and of course whenever you're doing this, if that handle's missing, you are seriously in problems. Okay, so be mindful of these. It is very important that you look and practice these. In the top left hand picture of there you can just see some you can see a cover open. Inside there is the controls to actuate the emergency lowering. So again, you've got that situation. You've got 2 areas there where I need to get to bring it down. Now, one thing that I'm quite happy of, and those of you who know AFI Group will know that we've done a series of familiarization videos on our MEWP rental fleet, so our mobile MEWP rental fleet. By the end of this week, all our self-drive track-mounted machines and self-drive trucks will also have familiarization videos available. So you're going to have the full scope of how to operate, familiarize, pre-use checks, function checks of the machine, but you're also, how to extend the tracks, etc. But you're also going to now have emergency lowering videos for these as well. So without doubt, a much easier way. So just be looking out for any information that's coming out there. They're going to be really easy, really straightforward. Okay, Ipath recently produced a number of posters and Toolbox Talks. So these are available for contractors and users. There's some of the things that have been quite easy. Always plan for rescue, so you can have these on your site. Understanding familiarization of the machine, knowing your machine. We've already seen a number of fatalities from falls. So clearly attaching your lanyard in boom type machines is going to hopefully mitigate and prevent that. Unsafe ground conditions, certainly up there insofar as some of the biggest causation factors for fatalities, and of course loading and unloading. We know that one of the most riskiest parts of our business is the delivery and collection, so our drivers are at high risk for having fatalities, and I've showed you already a fatality for a loading and unloading fatality, but just be mindful that this is probably one of the most dangerous activities, and sometimes it's go and load over there, mate, crack on. It's still under your responsibility, so be mindful of that. What we have been working on with the Ipath Council and the Ipath Training Committee is Toolbox Talks for each of these posters. So all being well, these should be out in early 2017 for you to use as well. Okay, then just to summarise, then we've gone through the reported incidents on Ipath's incident database, the categories of of the 1B, taking safety measures before planning your route and how to avoid hazards, considering ground conditions, routes, in, out and setting up, looking at ground conditions themselves, operating manual and the spec sheet, because certainly with the jib folded in you're going to get restricted capabilities. Obviously MEWPs relying on the ground, or what we know as the point of contact for their stability, setting up of the controls, making sure the setup, can I reach them, are they, have I done a full check of the machine, and looking at traffic and pedestrian management. The rescue plan, hopefully we're going to make life a little bit easier for you shortly, because you can have a visual film, effectively familiarization film, in how to bring this machine down or that machine down if the need arises. So I'm very proud that they'll almost certainly be available in the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks. Okay, questions and answers. If you've got any questions, I can take them. I've got a question from Mark there. You mentioned why the Ipath guidance for tracks is not in the manufacturer's manuals. Why? Can Ipath apply any pressure on the manufacturers? What you'll find, Mark, is a lot of these manuals are some of them are renewed and some of them are updated accordingly, but you'll often find that some of these manuals are quite quite a few years out of date, or the machine hasn't changed, so but guidance has. Some manuals from other rental manufacturers, from MEWP manufacturers, have actually been updated to basically include these these new sort of guidance documents. So I think in that sense, yeah, there is work, and I think certainly from a manufacturer's point of view, if those of you that are listening or will listen later, they do need to apply these to their machine manuals, because it prevents the machines going over. Simon's asking, training, can I use my Ipath card to operate a spider? You haven't put on there, Simon, what your Ipath card is, but if you have got a 1B card, then yes, you can. But of course, what you're going to have to be is familiarized and able to use that machine. So certainly going to need some opportunity to familiarize on it and make sure you're okay. Remember, they are complex, more complex than what you will get with a normal traditional MEWP. Clearly, if you've got a 3A or a 3B, then the answer would be no. And what you would need to do then is to do another category to get your card up to the necessary qualifications to use 1B type machines. Okay, I can't see any more questions. I think you've let me off lightly. Sometimes I get quite a few, but some of you may also not feel like you want to do any questions. Hey, that's fine. All I would probably say is to you is if you have got any questions, you can then either sort of drop it in the survey at the end or email me accordingly. I'm more than happy to take any of your questions afterwards if you feel as though you don't want your name read out on live. Right, so it's 11:27. I think I'm just about in time. I'll bid you farewell. Thank you for listening. Take care.